My name is Elizabeth Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom to four kids, ages 2 through 9, and we are learning how to make joy normal.
My name's Bonnie Landry, and I want to welcome you to season 2 of our podcast, Make Joy Normal. We want to thank everybody for their support and how much you've shared this podcast with your friends and those who you think it would be helpful for. I am a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma. I've been homeschooling for 30 years. My kids are ages 14 to 33. I only have one at home now. I'm a speaker, a writer, a blogger, and I guess we're podcasters now, Elizabeth. And I'm an advocate of joy. So welcome to our podcast. Hey, good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah. So is it looking like spring in Michigan yet?
Oh, no.
Not in Texas,
no,
it's
no,
not.
no.
So
Right. No, it's
no.
snowy and cold. Yeah.
Yeah. We've actually had the last week has been really snowy here, which is unusual for here. But we got probably 18 inches of snow over a couple of days. So, but it's melting
No
really
way.
fast now. So
18
yeah,
inches?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. In about 2 days, it just snowed nonstop. Yeah. When
Wow.
we get precipitation here, we get a lot.
Okay.
So now it's just pouring rain. Yeah, now it's just pouring rain. So
Wow. Do you get flooding because of
it
it
was
then?
fun. It was yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you live on low ground, you're going to get flooding. All the fields around here and stuff like that are flooding for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. I have a couple exciting things, so I want to tell you about them. Well, you already know this, but I'll tell you a little bit about it because I haven't really said too much about it. But so we've launched like a members platform. And the idea behind this is that once or twice a week, several times a month, I have just a drop-in Zoom with a topic, and people who sign up for the membership, which is very inexpensive. I wanted to make it really accessible for people. It's $5 US a month, and people can drop in as many times as they want to through the week. And you can also submit questions, whatever the topic is of any particular Zoom, it doesn't really matter. I'll talk for 10 minutes on that topic, but if people's questions are something completely different, we'll do that too. So we already have a bunch of people signed up, so I'm super excited about that.
That's great.
And anyway, if people are interested, go to my website and you'll get a drop-down menu that'll sort of explain it all and all that. But the idea of this was partly to be the support for our podcast, so we can keep it up and running, but the support for our listeners, right? Because we get so many questions, and a lot of times people want to have a conversation, right? And so I think this really answers that need. So that's thing number one. We also had a winner for our Tonys. So for anybody who submitted entries, thank you so much for your entries. And for sharing your entries. That was really nice. And our winner's name is Claire, and her Tony will be at her door in the next couple of weeks. So congratulations to Claire. And then last thing is that we've been sort of focusing the last couple of episodes on sort of difficulties. And I'm very excited about our today's episode as well. But in our next episode, we're interviewing a mom who we'll be talking about homeschooling and depression. And one of the things that we get from on this topic, I've had several people submit questions about depression or ask me personally questions about depression. I don't have a reference point, so I really wanted to bring somebody in who did struggle in this way. And often the question is, should I homeschool, right? If I struggle with depression. And so I'm really excited about interviewing her. And I think that'll be really good for anybody who struggles with depression, mental illness, even like postpartum depression or occasional getting the blues. I think it's a really good time of year to address that because we all feel low sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a really, really important question to answer. And I've been reading a bit more about podcasts, and I'm supposed to always say at the beginning of the podcast, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. So I'm going to say that now. So you have some questions for us.
So we're going to kind of talk about just kind of the blues, and especially it's worse now because of COVID stuff and shutdowns, and that makes the typical winter blues so much worse.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. I had somebody submit a question a couple of days ago that they said, how do you avoid the woe is me attitude? Right. And I
Yeah.
thought that's such a perfect way to kind of summarize, how we feel this time of year. I mean, ultimately we end up sort of feeling sorry for ourselves. Like, why do I have to,
Right.
you know, why do I have to do all this stuff? Why do I have to raise all these kids? Why, why do I have to, be stuck at home? Why can't we do the normal things that we do? And then that's always an issue, I think, for
Mhm.
parents in general, but I would say homeschooling, a lot of homeschooling parents, they tend to feel end of January, February, wintertime, they sort of feel like a bit buggy.
Mhm.
They feel like the school year is half over and they didn't accomplish all the stuff they wanted to accomplish. And so there's just kind of this bit of a feeling like, why am I doing this? And what is this all about? So we had some good discussion points to address about that. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
the blues.
Yeah. Um, so I think for me personally, the blues surround missing community and being with other
Mhm.
people and other families.
Yeah.
And, here in Michigan, it's not just because of COVID, it's also winter, like roads aren't always the best to drive on. It's not always easy to bundle up kids in car seats and,
Yeah. So
get
much
them.
work, right? So much work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that weighs heavy on me, and I'm sure it does a lot of listeners. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you guys deal with that much or did when yours were growing up.
Different. I mean, a little bit different here. We don't get the cold, but we do get the rain, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not so much a big deal to get the kids in the car and take them somewhere. But in terms of just getting them outside, and we found, the kids really needed some outside time every day. And so, when you can get, sometimes weeks on end where it's pouring rain,
Mhm.
so that's definitely difficult. But I think, what I think what people are really missing right now is the fact that not only can they not bundle the kids up, there's nothing really rewarding to go do once you've bundled them up, right?
Right.
Because we can't go spend the whole afternoon with friends or something, right? We're not allowed to do that right now. Um, so, I think that we have to find ways of sort of planning that. And I think I think the key to a lot of avoiding a lot of problems is actually pre-planning something, right? So,
Mhm.
if you have local museums open, or if your local library is open, or what, to look around and sort of find what's open right now, even if it's a visit to grandparents' places. I think that that's really helpful for people to be able to move past that, but to plan, once or twice a week that you actually get out and do something, right? Even knowing that it's going to take a lot of work,
Yeah.
it's so worth it, right? But I think if we plan it, it's maybe less likely to weigh us down, that we can talk about it and even have fun in the talking about it, right?
Mhm.
Have fun in the planning, and the kids can have fun in the planning. Like, oh, should we take a craft, with us when we go, or what should we do in the car ride, or whatever. And unfortunately, in places where there's cold winters, doing something outside is probably the ideal thing most of the year, but not during winter, right?
Right.
So, do you have anything around you that's open where you can? Because I don't live in a wintry place, I'm trying to think of what the winter options would be.
Right. Our library is open. And so
Nice.
the kids, I just don't love taking my toddler to the library right now because it's just that much more of a hassle
She's
during
a house
COVID.
wrecker. Yeah.
Right, a little bit.
Yeah.
And so there are times where, because my husband works from home, where if she's napping, I'll take the three boys and we'll go to the library, which they just love.
Nice.
We haven't been in a while though, because we have a fine. So
Yes,
the
I hate that. I always feel so embarrassed. I don't want to deal with it because I'm
oh yeah.
embarrassed.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
my boys lost a book under their bed. I told them, go check under your bed, and they did, and it was like probably weeks before we found it.
Another thing too that I think, I mean, I don't know what everybody's regulations are in various areas, but I think that we could assume that that if you're doing a school kind of project, if you're getting together, having a little co-op or having a little, science study or something like that, that it would be okay to get together with another homeschooling family, depending, of course, on that family's comfort level. But
Mhm.
because I think almost everywhere schools are actually in. And so, I think that you know, even though there may not be specific overt regulations about homeschoolers, we could probably assume that if we're getting back to, um, you know, school, that we could also get back to doing some sort of school type activity with our
Hmm.
little kids, you know, as homeschoolers, right? And I think, you know, as long as we're sort of following the same, um, you know, rules that the schools have to follow, that would probably be totally appropriate to do that, right? You know,
Sure.
I mean, sometimes you have to put feelers out there. You know, does anybody feel like, you know, sort of creating kind of an afternoon or a couple of afternoons a week where we can get out and do sort of some sort of learning activity that would emulate what's happening in school, right?
Hmm.
And I think for mom's mental health, that's probably really important too, right?
Right. Right. Um, so just kind of moving forward, not only missing friends, but missing being around family.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one thing that we've got heard time and time again, it's the ability to hug other people.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
texting with my sister-in-law this morning about that. And, you know, we're saying, oh, it would be so nice when we can just get together and it can be loud and it can, you know, whatever. And I said, yes, and hugging,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because human touch is so important, right? It almost
Right.
makes me wonder, is this going to have the effect of that our good friends that we see all the time, but we maybe they're not the people we tell them we love them or we hug them, or when we see them, maybe we will. You know
Hmm.
how, you know, when you have close friends and you see them all the time, you don't necessarily have those conversations. You know, they're your close friends and they're just there, you know, and but you don't necessarily hug them all the time. But if they've gone away for a month or something and then come back and then you give them a hug, and you know, it's like, I wonder if COVID, maybe that will be one of the silver linings of COVID, is that we will hug more.
Yeah.
You
I
know, because
mean,
it's been kind of robbed of, we've been robbed of it, right?
that's the hope. But I also find, so I have always been an extrovert until I started having kids. And then I was at home
Really?
and my husband was working and my friends were all working because, with the exception of maybe one or two of my friends from college, most of my friends just recently started having kids, like in the last
Right.
couple years. So, you know, my oldest is 9, and some of my friends' oldest are like 3, maybe 4.
Yeah.
So my husband and I were, you know, parents before a lot of our friends. And so
Right. That's
we
hard,
kind of,
right?
right.
Yeah.
We lost touch with friends, you know, just because it's hard to bring a baby anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember when I first found out I was pregnant with my son, I told my friend when we were out, like we were at a bar, and I was sitting there and she was like, "Why aren't you drinking?" And I was like, "Well," and she goes, "Oh my gosh, you have a baby in a bar right now."
Yeah, it's such a mental adjustment, eh? To
Right.
yeah, to be kids.
Right.
I know we were actually like that as well. Like I had babies before most of my friends did and before my siblings did. Um, and so, you know, I mean, I felt kind of alone and I had to kind of carve out friendships, right? And that was
Yeah.
harder to do. And now, of course, is really hard to do for people who are just getting started now.
Right, right. But I feel like I've become an introvert because I just don't always know how to interact with adults anymore. I there's this character in a show The Office, and he uses this line. He goes, "Gum's gotten mintier lately, hasn't it?" And it's just like that's just awkward. I feel like I'm awkward and weird when I talk to people. Like I don't know what to say. What's
Isn't
the
that
latest
funny? Like
thing?
you're out of practice or something.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
my fear is like, you know, God willing, all of this COVID stuff starts to lift. Like maybe I'm not going to know how to interact with people anymore.
I know it's brutal. Eh? I think what, you know, many of us will step out in kind of fear and trepidation, sort of like, oh, do you remember when the first lockdown happened? You know, it was like 3 months. And then I remember going to a grocery store for the first time and it was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, this feels super weird. Like, where are all the bugs or where, you know, like, it just
Right.
felt like a sci-fi movie.
Right. Well, and I don't know about on your island, but here, after the initial lockdown and it was kind of lifted, mask wearing was not required. It was
Yeah.
like okay, if you want to. So it's like half the people did, half didn't. And
Yeah, exactly the same thing.
I felt so conspicuous. Like I didn't wear a mask until I was told you have to. And so I'm walking around and I feel like I'm under a magnifying glass that people are judging me for not, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't you think
So
that's one of the difficulties of motherhood? Maybe it's one, again, maybe a silver lining of COVID was that we always feel like we're being judged. Like wherever we
oh
are,
sure.
if we have one child, we feel like we're being judged because we're a beginner. If we have 4 children, we feel like we're being judged because we have 4 children, you
Yeah,
know? And so we just constantly feel like, oh, we're being judged if our kids are dressed nicely, that we're trying to show off. If they're not dressed very well or their clothes are grubby, that people are going to think that, you're neglectful. You like, it's just a
right.
condition of motherhood to feel
Yeah,
judged. What is
right.
that all about?
Oh gosh. And God has humbled me many times for my judgment. I don't know if she listens to this, but if so, this is a formal apology. So there was a girl I went to college with, and she would share on Instagram or Facebook. Her kids would do just things like dump a whole 18 count carton of eggs on the floor, or there'd be like this picture of a gallon of paint dumped on the carpet. And I'd watch this and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what?" And she just seemed all calm about it, and I'm like, "I'd be losing my mind." Well, then I have my daughter, and she has dumped hot chocolate on our carpet. She has dumped a whole brand new thing of baking soda on our kitchen floor. She will dip her whole hands all the way up to her elbows in peanut butter. And do you know what I do? I just let her go. I take pictures, I laugh, I talk to her about how does that feel? Look at what happened. Let's
Yeah,
clean this
it's
up.
science.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. 5 years ago, that would not have been me. So
Yeah,
if my friend is listening,
yeah.
forgive me.
I
I don't
have
judge
a
you.
very sweet Yeah. I have a very sweet friend who I've known ever since the beginning of her having children. And when she had about her third or something like that, they come to this camp that we do every year. And she was very uptight with her first couple of kids. And with the third, they were running around and their feet were grubby. She goes, look, she has grubby feet. Or he has grubby feet. And it was like, yay, congratulations, you can do grubby feet. But that's a good thing, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's all perspective.
Oh, totally. Totally. But just back a little bit to missing the community. I know
Mhm.
I've mentioned this to you before, but I think it would be prudent to share with listeners. One thing that I keep thinking about during all of this, COVID and, now with the winter blues and everything is, so there's the point in the Bible, and I'm a Catholic, so I'm terrible with Bible references, but the creation story, were made in God's image. And so growing up as a small child and stuff, I always thought that meant like physical likeness. But that's not what it's referencing. I actually heard that it's actually referring to, a couple different things. One of it being God wanting community. That's part of the reason he made us, is because he wants to be with us. And so that's our likeness to God, is we want to be with people. We want to interact with other people. And that's being shut down right now, which is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. It's such a
Um,
need.
it
I don't know if
is.
I've ever told you this, but my blog that I started 10 years ago is called Practicing Mammal. And so one of the first few blog posts that I did, the first several blog posts that I did, I sort of explained why I named it that. And one of the reasons was because I had been breastfeeding for 25 years or whatever, and it was like, okay, I'm a practicing mammal, right?
Yeah.
Using my mammary glands. And but the other was the desire for community. So a lot of my blog posts are about our need for community, and our kind of all mammals have a need for community. That's one of the attributes of being a mammal, right?
Mhm.
And that actually, that's what I named. I don't know if I told you this, Elizabeth, but that's what I named
Mm-mm.
the membership group. Is called the Watering Hole, right?
Oh.
So we can all gather at the watering hole, right? And that's what mammals do, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so what a lovely idea that, but often we don't, we live in our
Mhm.
own little cellular worlds, and we don't live in the village. We don't gather at the watering hole. We don't do that,
Right.
and again, maybe that what we've been through for the last year, can you believe it's a year? Oh my
Oh
gosh.
gosh.
That maybe it will help this culture value that more, and value being with each other more.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
hope so. I hope so.
Hmm.
Um, wow. Well, on that, we can kind of move on a little bit, um, and talk about mom guilt. Do
Oh,
you do you
yeah.
ever experience mom guilt for taking care of your needs?
I certainly did. I mean, like occasionally I would say even now I probably feel mom guilt. I don't know, we feel mom guilt about such stupid things, right? Like about not worrying about my adult children. I'll think, oh, I haven't worried at all in the last few days. Well, what a dumb thing to, to have mom guilt about. Um, I've generally been pretty good in my life about taking care of me. I will have mom guilt about other things, like saying no to my kids about something. When I know that it's not a good thing for them, but I want beyond my own understanding, I want to be able to give them everything they want, right?
Mhm.
And so, maybe the money's not there, or maybe maybe you think it would be bad for them or whatever, but in our deepest desires, we really want our children to be happy, and something feels like giving you everything you want will make you happy, right?
Right.
Or not being able to carry the burdens for them, especially teenagers and
Oh,
whatnot, their life gets burdensome, and that you can't carry that for them. And so even though that they have to go through their things,
mhm.
I just wish so much that I could carry their burdens for them, right? But I know
Right.
that's how they grow. That's how they become who they're supposed to become, is by working through those things, right?
Right.
Um, so do I feel mom guilt about taking care of myself? Certainly in the early years I did, and
Mhm.
particularly for me, it was particularly about spending money on myself, right? I always felt a little bit like, I don't know, because I didn't have an income of my own. And Albert's very, generous. And it wasn't like he was, looking at what I spent and thinking it was imprudent or something like that. He was never like that. But it was just my own sort of sense of, well, I don't have my own income. And
Mhm.
so, if I want to buy something, that seems wrong. I'd buy all kinds of things for other people, right? And
Right.
not think anything of it. So that was probably how that played out mostly for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
I it comes and goes. I
Hmm.
think one thing I feel this is so silly. I feel guilty for prioritizing myself with things,
Right.
especially when I hear of friends that aren't, right? So it's like I'm comparing myself to other friends, and my I'm going to share this, I don't care. I talked to a therapist for anxiety. It's not a
Yeah.
big deal, it is what it
Yeah.
is, but he tells me over and over again that I feel like I need to be in a struggle. It's like I force myself into struggles, it's like wearing myself thin,
Right.
almost as a badge of honor, right? And so when I'm taking care of myself, I feel like I'm not being a mom, right? Because moms are supposed to
Right.
wear themselves down and you
Wow.
know,
Okay.
um but I also have to tell myself, okay, when I go to CrossFit, that is taking care of myself so I can take care of my family.
Yeah.
And so that's important to do that.
Yeah.
When I go out with friends pre-COVID,
Yeah.
I'm taking care of my mental health. I'm
Yeah.
taking a break, I'm refreshing, re-energizing, and then I'll be a better mom.
Yeah.
Um, so I do have to tell myself, remind myself that. But I think where I often feel guilt in the day to day is when at the end of the day and I'm ready for my kids to go to bed so that I can relax.
Yes, I know.
Then I feel guilty, because it's like, gosh, they go to bed and I'm sitting there on the couch and I'm like, I should have read another book. I should
Aw.
have listened to them tell me their crazy stories. I should have played another game with them, and so that's where the
Yeah.
guilt sinks in, is that I'm,
Yeah.
ready for them to go to bed, but then there's a day gone,
Yeah. I
so
know. Yeah, it's all about balance, right? It's all
yeah,
about balance. The
yeah,
I know a lot of homeschool moms feel guilt about not doing enough with their kids in terms of their education.
yeah,
And that's something that kids learn in spite of us. And so if you don't get all the things done that you had hoped to get done in a day, sort of educationally, your kids are going to learn anyway. And so
hmm,
it's one of those things that the more kids you have, or the longer you're homeschooling for, most of us come to a point where we think, okay, you know what, it's okay. They're just going to be fine, right?
hmm, yeah,
Everything's going to be fine. And, but the early years, especially, I find it particularly, you know, difficult when I hear somebody with very young children. How do I make sure I'm doing enough with my young kids? My toddler's really demanding, baby's really demanding, and my 6-year-old, I'm only doing 20 minutes. Well, you know what? 20 minutes is ample for a 6-year-old, right?
hmm,
And because you're doing a lot of stuff in your day that chalks up to education that you probably just don't realize is education. Every time you're talking to them, every time you read a book, every time you walk outside, every time you do anything, you are giving them an education, right?
hmm,
Even as you're monologuing about what you're doing, that's part of their education, but we don't see it that way. And so that's something that I think, we need to become more aware of how much we do, how much we give, how much we are valued. It was one of the things actually that my husband, when I was saying that I felt guilt about spending money on myself, like I had no problem taking the time, like going for a massage or going something like that, but it was the money that I felt guilty about. And Albert said, if I hired somebody to do all the things you do, that would cost a lot of money, right? So you don't need to feel bad about that anymore. You don't need to feel guilty about that. And which is true, right?
hmm,
So again, if we put things in perspective, we're probably much less likely to feel mom guilt.
yeah,
But again, talking to other moms is one of our best ways out of that, right?
hmm,
Is talking to other moms. And I mean, even though another mom might feel just as much mom guilt as you do about whatever you feel it about, when it's objective, when she can see the sort of the ridiculousness of your mom guilt, and she can share that with you, so you can sort of balance each other off in that way. Friends can do that for each other,
right,
and yeah. So we have to
right,
reach out to our friends, even if we can't see them in person right now. I think it's really important that we plan phone call or a Zoom. We're all good at Zoom now, right? We can all Zoom or FaceTime or
right,
whatever,
right,
so that we are still reaching out. And maybe even a situation where you put your earbuds in so that you're kind of having a private conversation,
hmm,
right? Because
yeah,
usually what happens, we get together with our friends, the kids all go off and play, and you can kind
hmm,
of have a more intimate conversation because the kids are all busy with each other,
right.
right?
I have a friend from college, and she's always been really good at putting her phone down when she gets home from work. It's family time, it's
Yeah.
time with her kids and her husband. And so we have this group text that we've had going on for like 6 years. It's just three of my friends and myself.
That's
And so
awesome.
last night, two of us were chatting, and I gave up TV and social media for Lent. And
Okay.
I was asking them, okay, guys, this is a stupid question. What do I do? My husband has to work right now. If I sit down to read a book, I will fall asleep. And it is only 9:30. So they were chatting with me and stuff. And then I had set my phone down, and I'm getting a FaceTime call. And I answer it, and it's one of my friends, and she's laughing, and she goes, so and so's son called us. So it was one of my friends. Her son FaceTimed us, and he's like 3. And he's running around the house with the phone. And so my other friend and I are just laughing. And so then finally my friend picks up the phone because she heard me laughing, and she's like, "What's Lizzie doing in my house?" And so it was like, it took her toddler to bring us together for an actual FaceTime call.
Aw.
Even though it was just 5 minutes, it was just really nice to see my friends because they're both
Yeah.
in San Diego, and I don't get
Yeah.
to see
So
them. So
nice. Yeah. So nice. I think
yeah,
make the effort. I don't know why it's so hard, like so much harder than texting, to just see somebody in person, but we have so many tools to do that with now, right? It makes a real difference, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also timing, like if you have friends in a different state, especially in a different time zone,
Yeah.
it's hard to match up schedules.
I know. Yeah, my daughter and I have sort of hit the sweet spot. Like if I usually a really good time for me to call her, she's 3 hours ahead of me. A really good time for me to call her is around 11 o'clock my time. So that's a really good time for me and also a good time for her. The kids
Yeah.
have usually had lunch and then, they have, some playtime after lunch and then they're kind of on their own. She said they're usually sort of quiet and occupied at that time. So,
Yeah.
and then sometimes they chat with me as well, but it's just a good time. And so it's been nice to kind of find that moment that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Okay. So you started off our episode today talking about the woe is me attitude.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we touched this specifically. How do we avoid that attitude during our busy homeschooling days?
That's a great question. So I talked a bit this about on the other podcast that I do, Martha. I did a little series about a month ago on resilience, where I did sort of, I don't know, half a dozen episodes on resilience. And in the last couple of years, I've been reading quite a bit about resilience. And one of the things that is one of the qualities of resilient people who tend to be naturally resilient, one of the qualities is that they kind of have gratitude, right, for their life. And there's many, many other things. If anyone's interested in that, it's for Catholic moms, but anyone could listen to it. It would be particularly this section on resilience. One of the things that can help us be more resilient is an attitude of gratitude, right? So out of the many, many things that are the attributes of resilience, they've done a lot of research, the scientists, people, researchers, done a lot of research on resilience in the last probably 10 years or so. And they've identified maybe, probably 25 or 30 qualities of resilient people. Some of those things are natural attributes that it would be hard to change, right? It would be hard to, would take a lot of work to become something that you weren't naturally. For example, somebody who was naturally, sees problems as challenges. Okay. So that would be one attribute, but it would take a long time to get there. You'd have to do a lot of practice kind of to get to that place. But some people are just born that way, right? They see a problem and it's a challenge for them. And they sort of see all the problems in natural light, in the best light. But there are other attributes that I think are very changeable and we could lay a foundation of resilience, and that's one of them. So how do we do that? How do we develop gratitude? Okay, I think that's a really important question. And I think that woe is me, if we can step back and say, okay, most of us, when the kids are asleep or when the weather gets nice or whatever, we actually take a look at that and think, what was I thinking? I have a really good life, right? And there's hard things and there's difficult things and there's difficult people in my life, but I have a good life, right? I have a roof over my head. I have a good husband. I have, I live in a beautiful area. I have this opportunity to homeschool, whatever it is, all the blessings of your life, but we don't remember them, when we need to remember them. And so I think that one of the things that's a really good idea to kind of build that attitude and by building your own resilience is to write down things that are the blessings of your life. So, when you're in kind of a good mood, make a list of, maybe 10 things and keep it somewhere really obvious so that when you notice that feeling starts to creep in, that you have something you can actually look at, maybe post it in a few places in your house, that you can actually look at that list and think, no, you know what? I have a lot of blessings in my life. And even if I don't feel blessed right now, that I can look at that list and think, okay, I know that I am. So intellectually, I know that I am blessed and I have many, many good things. So, I think that's one exercise that we could use to just make, gratitude a greater part of our life. I also think really important to be aware of when you feel that woe is me and see if there's a pattern, right? Do I feel it when my husband has to work late, you know, when I feel sort of put upon, like I can more than I can handle? Do I feel like it? Do I feel like that when I'm not getting regular time by myself? You know, do I feel like that when I'm feeling like the house is on overload and I have a ton of housework to do, or everything's backed up, or my kitchen is messy? Like that can set me off. Like if my kitchen's dirty, that drives me crazy. So it's
Mhm.
something I find I have to keep on top of all the time, because it's one of those things that I can walk through the kitchen and think, oh my gosh, right? Look at that. And it can
Yeah.
bring me down, right? And I can think, you know, and then I can start having thoughts like, why does no one ever help me? You know, why am I stuck doing all this stuff? You know, why did I have all these kids anyway?
Right.
Those kind of things. So notice the patterns of when you start to feel that way. For many of us, that's seasonal. But also the patterns in the day or the patterns in the week, so that you can manage them better, you
Mhm.
know, and maybe offload some of the duties, or stay on top of some of the duties that are ones that bug you the most. Maybe it doesn't bug you at all. If the living room has books spread all over the place, it's just a sign of everybody having fun, or there's toys everywhere. But maybe
Mhm.
dirty dishes in the sink, you know, is enough to make you just feel, to suck you down, right?
Yeah.
So we want to avoid those things that suck us down and put more time into those. You know how, you know, when you go to university, uh, you know that of all the classes that you have to do, you just can't do all the things, right? You
Mhm.
can't keep up on the readings. You can't, and you sort of have to pick and choose. Like, okay, what do I really love? What do I think I'm going to want to actually do as a career, or what am I going to appreciate the most, or what's going to be the most value in my life? And you
Mhm.
sort of have to pick the 3 or 4 classes that are the most meaningful to you, and
Right.
let other things slide a little bit. Not that you're going to fail them or anything, but that you kind of think, okay, you have to take stock, right? And I think that we have to do that as moms. We have to say, okay, what is it that brings me joy? What is it that sucks me down? How can I sort of take stock and make that work for me better, right? How can I
Sure.
manage those things better, you
Mhm.
know, especially during crisis times, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll be talking about homeschooling and depression next week, and I think it's a really, really important topic. You know, it may not be of interest to everybody, but you know, even if you know somebody that is, you know, struggles, that sometimes to become part of their support network is really important. But also, even if you just occasionally feel down in the dumps or whatever, you probably will be able to pick up some really good tools about
Mhm.
how to manage those times, those low times. You know, and take a look at how do we homeschool, or should we homeschool at these times in our life.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay. God
you.
bless and take care, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Okay.